Israeli troops have completed the encirclement of the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, Israel's military said Tuesday, as it seeks to complete its offensive operations against Hamas militants in the north of the enclave. The camp, Gaza's largest, has been hit by renewed Israeli strikes in recent days following the end of a week-long pause in the conflict. The IDF also said it took control of key military posts from which attacks on IDF troops have been carried out. It said weapons and launchers had been located in civilian compounds, and it had located and destroyed rockets found in the garden of a residence in the northern Gaza Strip. Jabalia is a densely populated refugee camp established shortly after the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled or were expelled from territory that encompassed the newly established State of Israel, and later denied return. The camp is a crowded, built-up area, with houses, shops and apartment buildings jammed up against one another. Israeli strikes in October targeting Hamas commanders and the militant group's infrastructure in the camp left catastrophic damage and killed a large number of people, according to eyewitnesses and medics in the enclave. The British royal family can be a litigious bunch, but perhaps no member is more so than the Duke of Sussex. Prince Harry's tempestuous history with the media is well documented at this point. His memoir offered insight into his deep resentment of the tabloid press, and it's no secret he holds them complicit in his mother's premature death. The 39-year-old royal has taken it upon himself to fight for a more responsible media, as he once put it, and is currently engaged in a number of legal battles in the United Kingdom. The most recent case making headlines, this challenge is a joint endeavor with several high-profile individuals, including Elton John and his husband David Furnish. Campaigner Doreen Lawrence, actress and model Elizabeth Hurley, actress Sadie Frost and former politician Simon Hughes make up the rest of the claimants. The group brought the case in October 2022 and alleged that ANL, which publishes the titles including the Daily Mail and Mail Online, engaged in various types of criminal activity to obtain information about individuals in the group. ANL has denied any wrongdoing. The group accused ANL of hiring private investigators to plant listening devices in homes and cars and record private calls. The publisher has also denied allegations that it would pay corrupt police officials for inside information, engage in impersonation and deception to obtain medical records, and would hack into bank accounts and financial transactions by illicit means and manipulation. Britain's High Court ruled this month that the case over alleged unlawful information gathering could proceed despite ANL's attempts to have it dismissed without trial on the basis that it was brought too late. Justice Nick Lynn said ANL failed to deliver a knockout blow to any of the claims brought by the claimants. Prince Harry is also suing ANL for libel over a February 2022 Mail on Sunday story about separate legal proceedings against the UK Home Office over his family's security detail. The article was published with the headline, "Exclusive: How Prince Harry Tried to Keep His Legal Fight with the Government Over Police Bodyguards a Secret." Then, just minutes after the story broke, his PR machine tried to put a positive spin on the dispute. ANL has firmly denied the claim, with lawyers for the publisher arguing the report was an honest opinion that did not cause serious harm to his reputation. Harry's legal team are seeking a ruling in their client's favor without a trial. A decision from Justice Nick Lynn is expected soon. Russia has foiled more than 20 Ukrainian drone attacks over Russian territory in the past day, including on the capital, Moscow, officials said Sunday, a day after it launched its largest drone attack against the Ukrainian capital since the full-scale invasion began. According to Russia's Ministry of Defense, 24 Ukrainian drones have been destroyed over the territories of Moscow, Tula, Kaluga, Bryansk and Smolensk oblasts in the past 24 hours. In addition, Russian air defenses intercepted 53 Ukrainian drones during the same period over Ukrainian areas under Russian control, according to the ministry. They included Kharkiv, Kherson, the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, and the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic, LPR. 17 HIMARS MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, projectiles have been intercepted over the past 24 hours, the ministry added. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said no injuries or damage were reported as a result of the wreckage from intercepted drones. In the Russian region of Tula, one of the drones crashed into an apartment building, resulting in damage to windows and one person receiving a slight cut, according to the Tula governor, Alexei Dyamin. An attack that targeted the DPR damaged the power system and left parts of the region without power overnight, according to the DPR's Russian-backed head, Denis Pushilin. The situation is difficult, Pushilin said on Telegram on Sunday, adding, "The work is ongoing. Everything is being done to return the heat and light for our citizens as soon as possible." Russia's Ministry of Defense also said Sunday that its air defenses had destroyed two S-200 anti-aircraft missiles in the air over the Sea of Azov at around 11 a.m. Moscow time, 3 a.m. ET. The attacks follow Russia's largest drone attack against Ukraine's capital of Kyiv since the start of its full-scale invasion, according to local officials. A Telegram post from Ukraine's Air Force said it had intercepted 71 Shahed drones across 6 regions of Ukraine, with the vast majority in Kyiv region. It described the attack as a record number of drones. The attack on Kyiv left 77 residential buildings and 120 establishments in the city center temporarily without power Saturday, before supply was restored later in the day. As the weather grows colder, Ukraine faces fears of a repeat of events from last winter, when Russia carried out a sustained campaign of attacks on its energy infrastructure. 50 years after Henry Kissinger drove American foreign policy in Southeast Asia, the region continues to live with the fallout from the bombing and military campaigns backed by the former Secretary of State, who died last week. In Cambodia, unexploded ordnance left over from Vietnam War-era carpet bombings, orchestrated by Kissinger and President Richard Nixon, are among the remnants of war that continue to kill and maim adults and children, year after year. The country of roughly 17 million is also still recovering from the genocide perpetrated by the Khmer Rouge, the brutal, ousted government that experts say gained recruits buoyed by desperation in the country after the relentless American assaults. Before the Americans, the countryside of Cambodia had never been bombed out. But, then, something would drop from the sky without warning and suddenly explode the entire village, said Yuk Chong, executive director of the Phnom Penh-based Documentation Center of Cambodia. When your village is bombed and you were told that it's some Americans that dropped the bomb, and when you lost your sister, your brothers, your parents, what is your choice? Be a victim and die by the bomb or fight back, said Chong, himself a survivor of the Khmer Rouge's notorious killing fields, whose organization now documents the legacy of the genocidal regime. Even today, the generation born after the Khmer Rouge may largely not be aware of the names or legacy or Kissinger and Nixon, Chong added, but they know the history of the B-52 bombers and the American involvement in Cambodia. Kissinger's death at the age of 100 last week has placed back into the spotlight the actions of the controversial titan of American diplomacy, with some of the starkest critiques coming from Southeast Asia, where the U.S. was already at war when Nixon took office in 1969. Kissinger, who served as his national security advisor and later Secretary of State, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 for his role brokering a ceasefire that ended U.S. involvement in the war in Vietnam, and came on the heels of heavy U.S. bombing across northern Vietnam. But documents declassified in recent decades have shown an unvarnished picture of the closed-door calculations that saw Kissinger and Nixon ramping up covert bombings across Cambodia and extending a secret war in Laos as they sought to choke off North Vietnamese supply lines and quash communist movements in the countries. It's not known how many people died during this time in Cambodia and Laos, which were officially neutral in the war, but historians say the number could be well over 150,000 in Cambodia alone. Documents have also revealed what analysts say was the role of Nixon's successor Gerald Ford and Kissinger in signaling America's approval of Indonesian President Suharto's bloody 1975 invasion of East Timor, estimated to have left at least 100,000 dead. Kissinger and Nixon saw the world in terms of getting the kinds of outcomes that they wanted. People who were in weaker or marginalized positions, they didn't really matter that much. So the fact that they were made unwilling pawns, the fact that they became literally cannon fodder, was of no consequence, said political scientist Chong Ya-Ian, an associate professor at the National University of Singapore. This sort of action does have a cost on the U.S. more broadly. A lot of the continuing skepticism and suspicion about the U.S. and U.S. intentions was born out of actions such as what Kissinger and Nixon had engaged in. From October 1965 to August 1973, the United States dropped at least 2,756,941 tons of ordnance over Cambodia, a country roughly the size of the U.S. state of Missouri. That's more than the Allies dropped during World War II, according to an account by Yale University historian Ben Kiernan. Such ordnance in Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam, as well as landmines and other explosives from the decades of conflict that followed in the destabilized region, continue to pose a grave risk to people living there. Nearly 20,000 people have been killed by mines and unexploded ordnance between 1979 and this past August in Cambodia, with more than 65,000 injured or killed since 1979, according to government data. Most of those casualties are from landmines, but more than a fifth are victims of other kinds of leftover explosives, which include those from American campaigns, experts say. During the first 8 months of this year, 4 people were killed, 14 injured, and 8 needed amputations due to explosives, according to government data. Experts say the devastation, which is especially acute for people in rural areas, will go on for years to come. 30% of everything shot, fired and dropped from an airplane doesn't work. We're going to be dealing with that stuff over here for probably 100 years. That's Kissinger's legacy, said Bill Morse, president of the nonprofit Landmine Relief Fund, which supports organizations including Cambodia Self-Help Demining. That group works not just to defuse explosives, but also train people to recognize them. Morse says children across the country are often familiar with how to identify landmines largely planted from years of regional fighting, but may be less aware of the range of unexploded ordnance, often from American operations, which continue to drive injuries and deaths. In the eastern part of the country, kids find cluster munitions that were dropped by the U.S. They play catch with it and it blows up 10-year-old children. Unexploded ordnance are where the injuries are coming from now, he said. Kissinger is widely seen as shrugging off responsibility for wartime decisions and the toll of the campaign in Cambodia, which government documents indicate he helped devise. One journal entry from Nixon's chief of staff describes Kissinger as really excited as the bombing campaign got underway in 1969. In a 2014 interview with American radio broadcaster NPR, the diplomat deflected criticism when asked about the bombings in Cambodia and Laos, instead arguing that the B-52 campaigns were less deadly for civilians than the drone attacks in the Middle East ordered by U.S. President Barack Obama. The decisions that were taken would almost certainly have been taken by those of you who are listening, faced with the same set of problems. And you would have done them with anguish, as we did them with anguish, he said at the time. Today, in Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia, government-run agencies and other groups continue to work to remove explosive remnants of war, with experts saying the U.S. government has become the world's biggest funder of unexploded ordnance and landmine clearance in the world. But aid groups who are also working on the issue say that the U.S. and other countries shouldn't lose sight of the ongoing consequences of conflict in the region. There is particular concern that funding for dealing with the aftermath of historic conflicts in Southeast Asia and elsewhere in the world might be jeopardized if funds are diverted to address new conflict-related crises, a spokesperson from the United Kingdom-based Mines Advisory Group, which clears explosives in countries including Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam, told CNN. The global community has a moral responsibility to all those in the world whose lives continue to be blighted by the impact of wars that ended before many of them were even born. Lahore has become the latest megacity to shut down as pollution chokes swaths of South Asia, where nearly 50 million people have been breathing toxic air for nearly a week. Pakistan's second most populous city, of more than 13 million people, has shut schools and closed public parks, malls and offices after the Air Quality Index, AQI, this week spiked to more than 400, according to IQ Air. That number is considered hazardous by the Swiss air tracking company. Authorities in Pakistan's Punjab province have imposed an environmental and health emergency in 3 cities, Gujranwala and Hafizabad, in addition to Lahore, until the situation improves, its chief minister Mohsin Naqvi said this week. The 3 cities combined account for more than 15 million people. There shall be a limited movement of people to and from these areas by public and private transport, a statement from Naqvi's office said Tuesday. Naqvi's government has also restricted the gathering of more than 4 people in one place. The pollution spike in Pakistan comes after neighboring India saw smog blanket its capital New Delhi last week, as colder temperatures trapped pollution particles, creating a toxic haze that reached hazardous levels. Traditionally, toward the end of the year after the winter harvest, millions of farmers clear their leftover rice stubble by setting fields alight to prepare for the incoming wheat crop. This, together with vehicular and industrial pollution, has created copious amounts of smog across the northern Indian states of Haryana, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh and New Delhi. India's Supreme Court this week ordered authorities in the states surrounding New Delhi to stop farmers from burning leftover crops, while also banning the use of firecrackers nationwide ahead of the upcoming Diwali festival this weekend. The court has issued similar orders over the years with minimal effect. Other major Indian cities, including Kolkata and Mumbai, also ranked on IQ Air's list of the world's 20 most polluted cities this week, with pollution levels fluctuating between hazardous and unhealthy. Local authorities have scrambled to implement measures to alleviate the pollution, from restricting vehicles on roads, sprinkling water on pavements and banning non-essential construction to reduce the dust. Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, which has a population of more than 10 million people, also featured on IQ Air's list of most polluted cities, with an AQI that reached 222 on Friday, a number that is considered very unhealthy, according to the company. The PM2.5 levels in all these cities far exceed the World Health Organization's limit and illustrate a growing concern for South Asian countries as they experience rapid industrializations and population booms that are fueling pollution levels. PM2.5 particles include pollutants such as sulfates, nitrates and black carbon, exposure to which can impair people's cognitive and immune functions. They are also linked to lung and heart disorders. Environment groups and policymakers have long called for more effective solutions to manage population growth, saying current measures such as restricting transport and halting construction make little difference in the long term. The effects of the worsening air are already visible in some parts of India. According to a 2021 study by the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago, EPIC, bad air could reduce the life expectancy of Delhi residents by as much as 9 years. The study also found that every single one of India's 1.4 billion residents endures annual average pollution levels that exceed guidelines set by the World Health Organization. Doctors in the Indian capital say they have seen an increase in pollution-related illnesses, with patients complaining of cough, throat irritation, shortness of breath and skin problems, among others. A Chinese warplane fired flares in front of a Canadian military helicopter over international waters of the South China Sea last Sunday, an operation that Canadian military officers said was reckless and could have resulted in the downing of the aircraft. The risk to a helicopter in that instance is the flares moving into the rotor blades or the engines, so this was categorized as both unsafe and non-standard, unprofessional, said Maj. Rob Millen, air officer aboard the Royal Canadian Navy frigate HMCS Ottawa, the warship from which the Sikorsky Cyclone helicopter was flying. The incident was the second of 2 encounters the Ottawa's helicopter had with Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy J-11 fighter jets over international waters on October 29, which saw the fighters get as close as 100 feet from the helicopter, Millen told CNN in an interview aboard the warship. He said that Canada and other nations have seen Chinese aircraft get close to fixed-wing aircraft on numerous occasions, but it was rare to see such action taken against a helicopter. The first incident was over international waters outside of 34 miles from the Paracel Island chain in the northern part of the South China Sea. The second was also over international waters outside of 23 miles from the Paracels. The warship was operating in international waters 100 miles, 160 kilometers, east of the Paracels at the time. The Canadian helicopter was searching for a previously detected submarine when the incidents occurred, officers aboard the Ottawa said. Millen said he was piloting the Canadian helicopter earlier in the day, when Chinese J-11s intercepted it at close range while it flew straight and level at 3,000 feet above the water back toward the Ottawa, a signal to the Chinese that it had no hostile intent. In that earlier encounter, Millen said the Chinese fighters flew in circles around his helicopter. When the intercepting aircraft was closer and closer, at a certain point it became unsafe, he said. His helicopter experienced turbulence coming off the Chinese jets, also posing a danger to the copter, Millen said. I certainly am not as comfortable as you can be based on the fragility of the rotor system, he said. Millen said he ended that encounter by descending to 200 feet, an area where the helicopter can operate but is very uncomfortable for fast air fighter jets. The Canadian Air Force major said his military's aircrews train on how to respond to such intercepts as occurred on Sunday and will continue to fly over the international waters of the South China Sea. Asked about the interception at a regular press briefing on Friday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin replied, I'm not aware of the situation you mentioned. We have reiterated many times our firm position on Canadian warplanes conducting reconnaissance near China's territorial airspace, he told reporters. We hope Canada will refrain from its inappropriate behavior to avoid the situation from becoming more complicated. CNN has also reached to China's Defense Ministry for comment. China claims historic jurisdiction over almost the entirety of the vast South China Sea, and since 2014 has built up tiny reefs and sandbars into artificial islands heavily fortified with missiles, runways and weapons systems, sparking outcry from the other claimants. The Paracels, called the Chisha Islands by China, are in the northern part of the South China Sea, east of Da Nang, Vietnam, and south of China's Hainan Island. The 1.3 million square mile waterway is vital to international trade, with an estimated third of global shipping worth trillions of dollars passing through each year. It's also home to vast fertile fishing grounds upon which many lives and livelihoods depend. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague concluded that China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to the bulk of the South China Sea. China has ignored the ruling. Major Western powers frequently conduct passage across the sea in order to assert that the region is international waters, sparking Beijing's ire. The Ottawa had been patrolling the waterway since last Monday, at times operating with United States, Australian, Japanese and New Zealand naval vessels and aircraft in a multinational exercise dubbed Noble Caribou. However, it was operating alone when the encounters with the Chinese jets. The Ottawa and the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Rafael Peralta overnight Wednesday into Thursday local time continued their deployment into the Taiwan Strait, another international waterway and vital shipping channel that has seen tense encounters between PLA and Allied vessels. Last June, the U.S. Navy reported a close encounter between the destroyer USS Chung Hoon and a Chinese warship during a Taiwan Strait transit, in which the U.S. warship slowed down to avoid colliding with the Chinese Navy vessel that cut in front of it. The Canadian frigate HMCS Montreal was accompanying the U.S. ship at the time, and a news crew aboard it recorded the incident. Then Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu blamed the U.S. for ratcheting up tensions in the region when questioned by reporters at a defense conference in Singapore. They are not here for innocent passage, they are here for provocation, Li said of U.S. warships. Li said if the U.S. and other foreign powers did not want confrontation, they should not send their military assets near China. Mind your own business, Li said, adding, why did all these incidents happen in areas near China, not in areas near other countries? This week's passage of the Allied warships through the strait was uneventful, however, with no contact reported. Sunday's incidents come after other reports of unsafe intercepts of Allied aircraft in the recent days. On Tuesday, a PLA fighter jet came within 10 feet of a U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber flying over the South China Sea, the U.S. military said. And earlier in October, a Chinese fighter jet came within 5 meters, 16 feet, of a Canadian CP-140 reconnaissance and surveillance plane over the East China Sea. That incident was recorded by news crews aboard the Canadian aircraft and witnessed by Maj. Gen. Ian Huddleston, the commander of Canada's 1st Air Division, who was also on the plane. Huddleston called the intercept unprofessional and very aggressive in a report from Radio Canada, which was on the plane. The Canadian aircraft was subject to multiple close proximity maneuvers by a PLAF aircraft that put the safety of all personnel at risk, Canada's Defence Ministry said in a statement. China's Foreign Ministry said the Canadian plane illegally entered Chinese airspace and accused the Canadian military of sending warplanes halfway around the world to stir up trouble and make provocations at China's doorsteps. In February, in an incident witnessed by a CNN crew, a Chinese fighter jet came within 500 feet of a U.S. Navy reconnaissance plane flying at 21,500 feet about 30 miles from the Paracels. Earlier this month, the Pentagon's top official in charge of security in the Indo-Pacific, Ely Ratner, said that the U.S. has seen more instances of coercive and risky behavior from Chinese pilots against U.S. aircraft in the last 2 years over the East and South China Seas than in the entire decade before that. Since the fall of 2021, we have seen more than 180 such incidents, Ratner said. It's a centralized and concerted campaign to perform these risky behaviors in order to coerce a change in lawful U.S. operational activity. An audacious collaboration between geneticists and conservationists plans to bring back the extinct dodo and reintroduce it to its once native habitat in Mauritius. U.S.-based biotechnology and genetic engineering company Colossal Biosciences, which is pursuing the de-extinction of multiple species, including the woolly mammoth, has entered a partnership with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation to find a suitable location for the large flightless birds. The dodo has been extinct since 1681. A combination of predation by humans and animals introduced by humans led to its downfall, turning it into a textbook case for extinction. But according to the partners, its return to Mauritius could benefit the dodo's immediate environment and other species. Colossal first announced its intention to resurrect the dodo in January 2023. Exactly when it will be able to do so remains unclear, but fresh details regarding how it plans to recreate the species have been revealed. The full genome of the dodo has been sequenced by Beth Shapiro, lead paleogeneticist at Colossal. In addition, the company says it has now sequenced the genome of the solitaire, an extinct relative of the dodo from Rodriguez Island, close to Mauritius, and the Nicobar pigeon, the dodo's closest living relative, which resides on islands in Southeast Asia spanning the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Geneticists at Colossal have found cells that act as a precursor for ovaries or testes in the Nicobar pigeon can grow successfully in a chicken embryo. They are now researching to see if these cells, called primordial germ cells, or PGCs, can turn into sperm and eggs. This is a vital step in creating hybridized animals through reproduction. Scientists have previously introduced PGCs to create a chicken fathered by a duck, for which a duck embryo was injected with chicken PGCs, producing an adult duck with the sperm of a rooster. It then bred with a hen, which gave birth to a chick. Colossal plans to go down a similar route. First, it will compare the dodo and solitaire genomes to the Nicobar pigeons to identify how they differ. Then it will edit the PGCs of a Nicobar so it expresses the physical traits of a dodo. The edited PGCs will then be inserted into the embryos of a sterile chicken and rooster. With the introduction of the edited PGCs, the chicken and rooster will be capable of reproducing, and, in theory, their offspring will resemble the dodo thanks to the hybridized pigeon DNA in their reproductive systems. Physically, the restored dodo will be indiscernible from what we know of the dodo's appearance, said Matt James, Colossal's chief animal officer, in an email. James described the project as an amazing engine of innovation for avian genetics, genomics, and cell biology, in part because most of the technologies that we use for cloning in mammals does not exist in birds today. However, he declined to put a timeline on when the first embryo will be created. While Colossal's laboratory continues its research, a team at the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, MWF, will busy itself feathering a proverbial nest. Vikash Tataya, director of conservation at the foundation, said the MWF approached Colossal earlier this year about a partnership, and is planning a feasibility study for where best to locate Colossal's birds when they are born. Mauritius is not a big island, it's 60 kilometers by 30 kilometers, Tataya said. Much of it has already been replaced by sugarcane, buildings, villages, and reservoirs. The most ideal site does not exist, he added, saying each potential location has pros and cons, with predators, poaching and other human interference all factors. Black River Gorges National Park, with its pockets of restored forest, is one location being considered. Neighboring nature reserves Round Island and the islet of Aigrettes are two others. The island and islet are not home to natural predators, he explained. Whereas on the mainland, invasive species including rats, feral cats, pigs and dogs, monkeys, mongooses, and crows may need to be excluded, rehomed or even controlled, for Colossal's dodo to thrive. On the other hand, Tataya said the foundation would like a location where the dodos could be visible to the public, and Round Island and Île aux Aigrettes are currently uninhabited. There is the possibility the dodo will be reintroduced at multiple locations, he added. Once human factors and alien predators are controlled, Tataya is less concerned about how the dodo will reintegrate into its environment. It was coexisting and co-evolved with other birds, other plants and reptiles, so I can't see them being competitive at all, he said. In fact, there could even be tangential benefits, he argued, citing mutualistic relationships which have broken down since the loss of the dodo. The bird's large beak is an indicator that it consumed large seeded fruits, he explained, and the dodo played a role in the seed's dispersal. Some of these plant species are threatened or highly threatened, he added, one hypothesis being that the seeds are no longer being sufficiently dispersed and primed for germination without the dodo and other extinct large species, another being the domed Mauritian giant tortoise. I think the dodo is going to be a big bonus for the restoration of ecosystems, said Tataya. While agreeing that the dodo could have a hand in dispersing seeds, Julian Hume, an avian paleontologist at London's Natural History Museum, who has studied the bird, offers caution. Despite being one of the most famous birds in the world, we still know virtually nothing about the dodo, so how it interacted with its environment is impossible to know, Hume said in an email. Colossal's idea is a sound one, he added, although, because of the complexity of recreating a species from DNA, even if it was possible, it can only result in a dodo-esque creature. It will then take years of selective breeding to enhance a small pigeon into a large flightless bird. Remember, nature took millions of years for this to happen with the dodo. As for studying the bird once reintroduced, at best, Colossal can only produce a bird with some dodo-like qualities, and a bird that has no inherent idea of how to live in the wild, so it would be rather naive to base any conclusions about behavior or other life history characters on it. Hume said. One lingering question is, why? Why pool resources into recreating a long-dead, flightless bird and sequestering it on an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean? Ben Lamb, CEO and co-founder of Colossal, argued that restoring the dodo gives us the opportunity to create conservation optimism that hopefully inspires people around the globe, specifically the youth, in a time when climate change, biodiversity loss and politics can make things seem hopeless. He added that the techniques pioneered by the Dodo Project could help restore other avian species. Tataya believes the high-profile project could offer impetus to wider conservation efforts on Mauritius. In our experience, when you start saving a species, it gives the drive for protection and restoration of habitats and ecosystem, he said. We're interested in entire ecosystem conservation. We don't want to find the dodo alone in a field, Tataya added. The director of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation said that in any case, the dodo's return is not going to happen overnight. We're talking about probably a decade. The birds would be created in the U.S. and would need to be imported, he explained. Citing the legal and political dimension of the project, he said, the years may add up. Tataya stressed that nascent de-extinction technologies should not provide a get-out for tried and tested conservation methods, particularly for endangered species, describing it as another tool in the toolbox, but not the tool that replaces the whole toolbox. Hume agreed, adding the huge investment made by Colossal could be used elsewhere to help save many other species on the brink through conventional conservation. The paleontologist is not against the de-extinction movement, but would rather see it applied to recently extinct species such as the thylacine, Tasmanian tiger, or species with non-viable populations, like the northern white rhino, which has only 2 remaining females. Colossal Biosciences is conducting research into both. The dodo, despite being a regrettable case of human-caused extinction, has really had its day, Hume said. Nevertheless, our ongoing curiosity is harder to extinguish. I have studied the dodo for many years, and there is still a lot to learn about this enigmatic bird, he added. If one was ever recreated, I would certainly be the first in the queue to see it.